Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast again today. And today I am welcoming Walt Steenbergen. He is president of CWG Inc. And I'm excited to talk with Walt today about marketing to doctors, specifically how to market to HCPs through publications, they still exist, and associations. Welcome, Walt.
Hi, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So, Walt, this is we've gotten to know each other over the last few years, and this is a pretty specialized area. Our agency, of course, works in this category of marketing to HCPs as well. But for you, since you guys are really focused on this category, I thought it'd be a good adjunct to what we do. And certainly, when the need would be appropriate, we would be reaching out to you for this highly specialized expertise you bring to the table. So, respect what you do. I'm excited to dig into this. So we'll just go ahead and get started. The when it talks to when we're thinking about peer-reviewed journal, like what is the role today? I mean, I've been around this, by the way, for a couple, almost 3 decades, and I remember controlled circulation publications, and those are I'm not sure if they even exist anymore. So let's just talk today about peer-reviewed journals, what's happening in the space. And maybe, I think a little bit of context for how things have evolved might be good too.
Sure. Happy to do it. I can tell you that journals are actually alive and well, although in a different form. As we've seen with all mainstream media these days, the role of the printed journals, which are actually mailed out to doctors' offices and sometimes their homes, which was the case a lot during COVID, have continued to decline. That being said, the digital versions of those journals, in fact, also email programs, e-table of contents, and so on and so forth, actually continue to play a very huge role in our journey of trying to market to HCPs.
So when we're talking about HCPs or healthcare professionals, that of course includes doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, and other professionals that you're trying to reach. When you're reaching out to them or when we're trying to reach them, what is your common audience? Is it almost always pharmaceutical, or who are the kinds of clients or their agencies that represent them? But tell me about your audience and some of the reasons why peer-reviewed journals are so important compared to other options.
Yeah, it's really about the credibility that the peer-reviewed journals bring to the space. The majority of clients that we have are pharmaceutical companies. We do work across medical device a little bit, although we find journals have a little bit less of a lever, if you will, with that particular audience, with orthopedic surgeons, for example, if you're talking about knee and hip replacements. But when it comes to pharma and specifically very new treatments and specialties, journals are still tremendously important. It is the rankings that we pull quite frequently from Kantar. We have several layers of that and many other different research tools as well, will consistently show that the journals are up there, always within the top 5 of places where HCPs go specifically to look for new treatment options, but also variations, new indications on existing drugs, and anything that works in that ecosphere, specifically around a particular specialty, like, say, oncology or ophthalmology.
Okay, that's an interesting thought so just backing up for a moment, you're saying that it's going to be usually new drugs would be the primary advertisers for this particular medium. Is that true? Where they're trying to get the word out about either launching or have launched, or, expand upon that a little bit for me.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, new drug launches make up, off the top of my head, I would say about 70% of the journal advertising that we place digitally or even endemically. There also, of course, is new indications with some of the new oncology drugs. It seems almost that they're getting a new cancer indication almost by the month.
Yeah.
And so to get out there in front of the oncologist and let them know, hey, Keytruda is now also approved for yet another indication or another specific type of cancer becomes very important.
Okay. And then in terms of peer-reviewed journals versus other publications that are doctor specific, What are some of the nuances there? 'Cause I'm assuming you get the call because a lot of times when we've worked with either pharma or other kinds of businesses, they want to reach every oncologist, for example. Like they really want to be thorough and they're looking for multiple impressions. So are there other publications that are not peer reviewed that they're still wanting to reach, or is it really peer reviewed is certainly the gold standard? How would give me a little sense of that?
Sure. Peer reviewed is still the gold standard, and the feeling amongst pharma and with us as well, quite honestly, is especially if you have a brand new mechanism of action that is coming into the marketplace, maybe it's a specific modality. We're working a lot, for example, right now in radioligand therapy, which has been around for a little bit, but the way that they're able to target the cancer cells for that is brand new, and the efficacy that it brings with the better side effect profile makes it really important to be in amongst that content and really what we like a lot about journals specifically is that, and HCP specifically, they're in that journal, they're learning. So their mindset is, I'm reading this journal, whether it be online through their iPad or whatever other channel that they're using to reach to get this information. They are actively seeking out what's going on in the marketplace and what the latest research is coming out. So to have an advertisement, and sometimes it is simple as a DSE or a disease state education ad there. In the case where we're doing market shaping, really just hits them at a time when they are very, very receptive to that advertising, as opposed to being attached to a rerun of I Love Lucy that you're streaming on one of Hulu or one of the other platforms that are there.
That
So
totally
there,
makes sense. That receptivity. It's funny. The just in our own podcast and our the content we publish that is read by both executives, marketing people, and doctors. I find that it's been really interesting, and we're going to talk about social media in just a moment here. The Our newsletter was for by far our biggest driver, our email, I should say, distributing our blog was by far the most important thing. But now social media, particularly LinkedIn, has really changed things for us, for our promotion. And I think it is because of receptivity. People are going, when they're in LinkedIn, if they're a LinkedIn user, they're going there to eat the feed. They were looking for content, whereas email could be doing anything and it's kind of a distraction. So that's the receptivity totally makes sense to me that if that's the journals would be, okay, I'm here to learn. I'm here to get caught up. And it's like that would be the prime time to do that. So, speaking of social media, tell us about how social media has become more important in conjunction with the things we're talking about today.
absolutely. We've seen, especially since COVID, when we pull our rankers for where this is almost across the board, there are certainly subtleties and differences between the channels that specialties will seek out. But very often these days, YouTube shows up as a channel that an HCP will go to seek out information. And we actually went back and we had some very deep meetings with Kantar and our representatives that were pulling this, going, yeah, we understand HCPs are on YouTube. Everybody's on YouTube. But how do we know specifically that they are engaging with these particular platforms and searching for that content? And of course, they are tracking what the searches come up for. So very often we'll stick with oncology just because it's such a huge category. Very often we'll have maybe it's a Sézary syndrome search or a rare disease search or symptoms that look like X, Y, and Z from HCPs, and we can target them through their NPI numbers. And so we do indeed know that they are doctors that are searching for these particular topics. And the engagement rates typically with video, not surprisingly, this is really just again, I think the HCP universe really has a tendency to mirror the general audience, which we're all looking at shorter form videos these days, so much more than reading a newspaper or even just reading an online newspaper. They are looking for that that engagement that happens with the video. And we often recommend it for our agency partners simply because especially if you have something like a new mechanism of action, to actually have an animation of how that molecule interacts with, say, a cancer cell is tremendously powerful. And the engagement rates are huge for that type of advertising.
Yeah, for sure. And sounds like some of the things we're looking at. The Let's talk about the other consumer media. So YouTube is, again, it's a search medium, right? People are searching, often looking for answers. And I often watch my own behavior. There are times that almost always my wife goes to sleep, but I'm either just sort of trolling around on things that interest me, or I'm like purposeful. It's a different kind of viewpoint, or I'm just checking out Jimmy Kimmel. It's like it's a very different, the same medium I'm interacting with differently. Any other comments on, for example, LinkedIn or Meta, Facebook, Instagram, or any of the others in addition to, and we'll talk about some more professional stuff in a moment. Just curious to compare notes, I guess, on the consumer social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And, fantastic point. Yes, LinkedIn continues to be a growing platform for us. And all of the things that we do are very data-based. And so we like the fact that you can target specialties, you can target even individual HCPs on LinkedIn. Meta is a moving target. As
Yeah.
you know, the engagement rates are tremendous. They continue to crawl up the rankings as far as media that HCPs will use to learn about new things. The algorithms change, the geo-targeting rules change constantly. So there's a lot of different things we have to be absolutely aware of all the time before we dig in. But it is a pretty common channel for us. Paid social has absolutely become a much larger piece of what we do for our clients.
Yeah, we agree. Well, like people are shocked when we talk about, and just the very fact we have a little bit different audience sometimes in terms of the prospects we're working with as clients, but the a lot of people are shocked that you can target on a one-to-one basis. That's the magic, right? You're not just reaching out trying to find somebody interested in medicine on Facebook. You're targeting on a one-to-one basis. That's the magic there. And it can be a very powerful tool. So let's talk about Doximity, because I've actually been interviewed by Doximity on their podcast a few times. And, Doximity, back in the old days, Walt, it's funny, they wouldn't return our calls. It was really funny when it first started. I don't know if that was hubris or what, but they're obviously a major player. Tell us about the role of Doximity. When is that appropriate? And then also, there's various, other platforms out there like that. So the category, I think, would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah. So we sort of there's two things that we sort of put Doximity under. There's two channels. One would be peer-to-peer, and the second would be endemic social. Because it really kind of plays across both platforms depending on what you're trying to do. So there are several different platforms out there. Doximity is certainly the largest one, but there's Sermo. Skipta was around for a little while. I think they've actually been absorbed by another one right now. They'll have their strengths and their weaknesses as to what they do. Really, the largest challenge we have with Doximity, and we do place a fair amount of business with them, is their minimum spends.
Yep.
They can be rather large. And so we hear this from clients all the time where they come on and they're like, yeah, we really want to do a Fast Five quiz or something on Doximity and Medscape and some of these other platforms. And we're like, you're absolutely going to be able to do that, but not with the budget that you have. In fact, we would not recommend spending all of your money there because it's just truly not an omni-channel place to have it happen.
Yeah.
That being said, those spends are high dollar typically, and we're talking high dollar to a small to mid-sized pharma, right? Not high dollar to one of the legacy pharmas or a Novartis or a Pfizer or anything. But their engagement rates are good. Their physician level data can get really granular, and you can really see the engagements and how long an HCP has gone and engaged with a particular post or looked at content, and really interacted with it and asked questions and talked to other peers about particular treatment options. So it is tremendously effective.
Yeah, the cost always comes up. It just does. And it's funny because I don't know if they're how much they're doing this now in the hospital side, but it's just the anybody else but pharma, nobody's used to these prices. They just
Right.
it's like fall out of your chair pricing. So it's like it's just a thing. So, but it is a very powerful tool. So let's talk about how are reimbursements making, nurse practitioners, PAs, more important in the care journey. And that's kind of a broader topic, but I think it is relevant in this discussion about, like, we talked about this before. This isn't just no longer marketing the doctors, it's marketing HCPs. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yes, absolutely. It's not really a secret that well, the insurance industry is under a lot of pressure and also scrutiny, along with the PBMs or pharmacy benefits managers from not only the general public, but also Congress and so on and so forth. And so there's constant pressure to lower that pricing. A lot of that comes down to lower reimbursement rates, especially in the Medicare space, in the Medicaid space, for a particular doctor to see a patient. So we see more and more of this recently where a doctor obviously runs a practice, but he brings in nurse practitioners and physician's assistants who are um, very capable of seeing a patient, diagnosing that patient, and in some case, even writing scripts, which they are allowed to do because of their training. So the doctor oversees sometimes a series of 9 or 10 different PAs or NPs. And so the doctor can bill for all of those different patients without actually physically having to be in the room with them at the same time. So the slightly lower pay that an NP and PA get figures into the economic model for a doctor's office, especially a mid-sized one.
So it's interesting. Like we talked about this offline a little bit too. This weekend I was out trail running and really dumb. At the end, when I was on the flat part, not the scary part, that's when I decided to fall and I had stitches
Oh,
this weekend. So my experience in healthcare is fresh, right? And I saw, medical assistant and I saw a PA. I never saw a doctor, and I was just fine with that. And I think beyond the cost factor, it's just access, right? Like there's not enough family doctors to go work urgent cares often, or there might be one there with a bunch of NPs or PAs. And these were, this is stitches on the bottom of my arm. Like I don't need a plastic surgeon for that. It's like so the idea of having, it's the only practical way to go. And of course, people now are there. A lot of times, these other healthcare professionals are making decisions just like the doctors are, and so it's certainly important. And so it's not surprising that your focus has moved much broader. And this has happened over time, but I'm sure that's just now it's completely as important as marketing the doctors themselves. Um, so let's flip a conversation a little bit. Congresses and certainly or association meetings. Um, these are big events. The companies that are exhibiting there have lots of money, oftentimes, especially pharma, are investing a lot, right? These are big booths with big staffs and big expense and, every possible sort of marketing gimmick sometimes. Talk about, the where that's going and in terms of the, role in the education and marketing to HCPs as well.
Yeah, congresses, I will say, continue to be super, super important, but there was it was very interesting to watch when COVID happened and a lot of these conferences went virtual. Tons of pharma clients that we have and their agency partners were like, well, we're just going to do a virtual Congress. It's going to be just as good as an actual live Congress and getting those doctors in the room. In fact, it'll be better because we can get doctors from all over the world to attend our Congresses and they can attend different sessions. And some of them I think did a really great job of like setting up different tracks. Like if you're looking for new treatments or new indications or whatever it happened to be. And the attendance initially was good, but then as the years went on, it just kept dropping lower and lower and lower, even though I think the pharma industry was declaring that congresses were dead. And that was it. They're not coming back, much like, returning to the office, never going to happen. It's over. And yet, as soon as they were able to open up again. And I attended a number of them myself, including bio, immediately after COVID was kind of on its tail end, and everybody required a negative COVID test to get in, and so on and so forth. I think there was 45,000 people at that first bio congress in 2022, I think that was, in San Diego, and the numbers have only gone up. And really, yes, the ability to get the information out there is tremendously important, but as with everything, the networking part of it and just being around people who are also seeking the information, and there is the social part of it, right? Doctors are people as well. So a lot of them work many, many, many hours. They spend a ton of time trying to get new info. They like to be in there with their peers. They like to be kind of just working alongside them, if you will. And what really surprised me, and one channel that we really started working in, was gamification of clinical data. And when the first booth that we ever were involved in, where doctors were required to put their names into a leaderboard, I said, there's no way HCPs are going to do that, because who wants to put their name on a leaderboard? Oh, wait, when you get a bunch of orthopedic surgeons in a conference, and one of the
Oh,
HCPs will walk by and make sure that their name is still up there. If it's not, you could hear them say things like, oh, that guy, I know that guy, I hate that guy, I'm going to beat him, and then I'm coming back. And they would just keep playing over and over and over and over to get to the top of the leaderboard at a Congress, which has no professional implications for anybody. It was simply the social aspect of being involved in the category.
that's really funny. And by the way, orthopedic surgeons, that does not surprise me at all. So, having worked with thousands of HCPs over the years and different of all specialties, orthopedic surgeons just tend to be the most competitive. If I had to pick one, who's the poster child for being competitive, it'd be orthopedic surgeons. I talk about that. I have a fun fact. This is not my quote. This is from an orthopedic surgeon. I was at a conference once, and he said, "You know what?" He tells the audience, "You know what's the difference between God and an orthopedic surgeon?" And everybody goes, "What?" He said, "Well, God does not think that he's an orthopedic surgeon," and that's okay. So that wasn't my joke. That was his joke. So definitely a competitive group compared to some of the other specialties. It really is funny how the culture is different and based on specialty.
It
It's
is.
for sure. Um, so the congresses haven't gone away, and it's not surprising to me at all. I remember being in COVID, I was like everybody else, right? Nobody knew what was going to happen. And I was wondering, will people still shake hands? Although I was just in a business meeting the other day where somebody didn't shake hands. That's the first I've seen that in a while. But we did the elbow thing. But broadly speaking, most people shake hands again. Most people go to congresses again. These are just sort of deep-seated human responses that you mentioned. People like to be there. There's something about, also just engagement. I tried some of those virtual conferences as a user, and I find myself drifting and doing email and double checking, and it's just
Yes.
the same thing. It's really hard to engage sitting behind your computer, so that's not
Yep.
surprising at all. And so you're doing a lot with both then the peer-reviewed journals and the congresses, would imagine, and the any special sort of promotional tips of things you just like doing when you get involved with the congresses besides just having a big booth? Any other things like, do you like door hangers or anything else special you think is important?
I'm actually a big fan. So, as for the audiences that don't understand congresses, and this actually just came up about 6 weeks ago, we have an oncology client who said, we want to do a 20,000 square foot booth at ASCO. And I said, great, what year? And they said 2026. And I said, okay, we work with them a lot. There's going to be a waiting list. Let's find out where you're going to be. And they just were dumbfounded. They're like, do you know how much it costs to get a booth there? I'm like, yes. And do you know how many people will still pay all of that money to be in that particular booth? So sure enough, there's a waiting list for booth space at ASCO 2026. Not surprising in my mind, but it is surprising for pharmas, especially new ones that are coming in. But as far as there is all of the quote unquote typical stuff that you do. A lot of it we like. We love the Wi-Fi sponsoring when you have to log onto the Wi-Fi of the conference, and there's an ad there. We have done door hangers, we do columns, we do elevator wraps, but really, truly, in the states where it's still allowed, we love geo-targeting around a particular conference. And in some cases, we can do that by NPI. In some cases, we can do that by specialties. So at ASH, for example, a couple of years ago, we did a geo-targeting where we knew that an HCP was going into the building at down in Orlando, and so we were able to actually serve them up with an ad and then follow them, right? So
Yeah.
that's part of the retargeting that goes. So it shows up on their laptop and on their iPad and so on and so forth. So those are just great things, depending on your messaging, of course. And in a lot of cases, if you're trying to drive to booth, then that's a great way to do it. If you're just, in fact, if you don't have a booth, but you're still trying to make a splash, we like that. The out of home, which a lot of people probably don't realize, is there's a year, 2 year waiting list to sponsor the trains that come in from both O'Hare and Midway Airport into ASCO. The taxis are often sold out completely there. The signs that you see in the airport as you come in, it is really a long-term vision with a significant amount of spend behind it, if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, geofencing is our friend. That can be powerful. The so the without getting too political here, there is a change in our government and the administration in terms of, like what's happening with, the most respected, healthcare journals and other and so forth. It doesn't have the same how do I say this? Um, there's just
Cachet.
any ever, yeah, cachet maybe. Like, is that impacting this at all, or is it the source of truth, or is, for example, pharma racing to this because to find a source of truth? What's happening there?
It's interesting. We haven't seen it as of yet with the HCPs. I think we certainly, because of the upheaval that happened during COVID, the general public trusts their HCPs much less. They trust government messaging much less than they did, and obviously their own doctors. So many people did not get vaccines against the advice of their own HCPs who are managing their health. So we've seen that fallout go into this administration a little bit, and it's bled over into journals. And certainly, as is the case with anything where you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of articles published, there have been some flawed studies that have been published out of the hundreds of thousands, but of course the spotlight was put on those that, wow, see, this one study was erroneous in how they did their data, so therefore all journal data is bad, which is simply, just not the case. The HCPs that we talk to still are looking to that, to journals and the associations as a source of truth. The issue becomes, I think, when patients start going in, and as we saw with the rise and, well, perhaps the near almost demise of direct-to-consumer advertising that may be around the corner, where patients have seen something that a TikTok influencer has said is absolutely something that's going to cure their particular condition, and there is no journal study to back it up. It, from the patient's viewpoint, gives them a bit of a aha. See, you guys don't know about this.
Yeah.
And the HCPs will push back with, "Oh yeah, we do know about it, but we haven't had 10,000 people get studied in a double-blinded placebo study to prove that it actually does work. In fact, here's the potential harm." But there is that pushback, and that is being supported somewhat by the administration as to the legitimacy, I guess, of the data that's in medical journals. So far, from what we're seeing, the HCPs have not shied away from it, nor has pharma,
Yeah.
knowing what goes into actually getting published.
So it's really funny. I never thought of this, but one of my big jokes, and we'll have to have a glass of wine next time we get together for
Love it.
we'll do happy hour instead of lunch next time. But the
Please.
but the sometimes I think about just even choosing a marketing agency. It's like, well, you could talk to a national expert. You could talk to some guy you just met in the
Yes,
bowling
yes.
alley. So it has an equal vote. And that's kind of like thinking about that as the same thing. You could trust a doctor with science behind it and data, or you could trust some guy or gal on Facebook or TikTok or whatever. And it is exasperating. It just is. And so we'll see how that evolves over time, for sure. Pivoting over a little bit, and this is something else I think is great. I think when met at lunch the first time, I talked about, sort of my background and how we got here with healthcare success. And back in the day, before I founded this company, really did work with like, spoke with and interact with thousands of doctors. So I really learned like how they think. It's like, it's one thing to talk about this, it's one to actually work with doctors. And
Yeah.
I know this is back before, I was broadly thinking of personas, but they're definitely sort of types, and it can help instead of just saying I'm going to market to orthopedic surgeons to break that down. So let's talk about personas from your point of view, and how does that help bring insights rather than just going after broadly an oncologist or a rheumatologist or whomever? How do you work with personas?
Sure. Well, to our earlier point, right, about orthopedic surgeons being tremendously competitive, that's a great personality insight to have, right? So it becomes, how do you leverage that aspect of a typical, and again, nobody is exactly the same. There's
Of
no cookie
course.
cutters, right? But you do have certain things that we know. So we pull, for example, again, we'll stick with oncology, but we know that the average oncologist in the United States is over 50 years old. They are overwhelmingly male. They have a Southern United States geographic skew. We know that they typically do their research between 7 and 9 p.m. on a daily basis. They'll spend an hour roughly catching up with the latest trends that are happening. And there's about 50 other data points that we have about oncologists based on med surgery, surveys, real world experience, what we see with reporting and engagements across some of our digital platforms, even something as simple as QR codes, sometimes old school to go back that way. But all those things really help you put together. All right, so if you don't have a national physician identifier or NPI number, then what do you have that allows you to work with these guys? So, for example, when we are doing an email campaign that's working with journals, we like them to go out at specific times, specifically coming from a journal. Maybe it's an e-table of content that is got some new things in it. We would know that would be great for it to go out between 7 and 9 p.m. because that's when the HCPs are on their computers and increasingly, not surprisingly, on their tablets and even on their phones, catching up with their emails. And then there is something that fits right into what they're doing during that particular time period.
That's excellent. That really totally makes sense. So we also talked a little bit before about endemic versus non-endemic platforms. Any comments there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we like to work with endemic platforms for all the reasons we already talked about, where the ACPs are in there, they're getting their information, they're looking up things. They're in case of a sermo doximity, perhaps they're conversing with other doctors online about particular cases and the treatments that they put them on. But again, doctors are also consumers as well, and so with the targeting that we can do, it can get pretty granular, and you can also NPI target through a number of different channels, including programmatic across consumer channels or connected TV, as opposed to the linear. And it definitely has its place, but it always starts with what goal are you trying to get to? Are you trying to write scripts? Are you trying to raise awareness? Are you trying to block out a competitor? Are you trying to whatever the KPI happens to be for that particular case. So you have to individually look at every single one and figure out the best channels based on experience and data to actually target them and get a reaction.
So let's talk about the journey, because obviously, when there's pharma is launching a new drug, there's a life cycle that's going to happen there from the very beginning to the very end. So perhaps talk about some of the touch points and maybe some of the media that you're integrating at various stages.
So, great question. And this really points out, I think, some of the most I guess the starkest differences between how you would launch that really depends on the pharma, right? So doing a uh, when you're doing a portfolio launch, for example, for a Novartis, the HCPs are already very familiar with Novartis. You don't need to tell them that Novartis is just getting into the oncology space. Thanks. It's a
That would be
total waste
a
there.
little naive, Walt.
Exactly. So, in those cases, we work a lot. We do work with some of the legacy guys, the big guys, but most of the ones that we work with are smaller to mid-size. And we actually have an oncology company right now that has been working in the diagnostic side of oncology for years and years and years. They're super well known in labs. And in diagnostic settings, but they're not known in the therapeutic setting. And so we're putting together a market shaping campaign for them, which is literally simply getting out there that, hey, this company is moving. They've got some great new therapies coming in. You've never heard of them as a medical oncologist because that's not the side of the business that you've worked on. So there's a market shaping piece that goes on with that. If it's a particularly brand new MOA, then you start talking about this mechanism of action is superior to the standard of care or SOC because X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's a side effect profile, whatever it happens to be. And all of those things affect the channels that you pick before you get there. A lot of times, especially in these cases, we'll do a coming soon. You'll start with maybe it's a branding, then a DSE, disease state education, which talks about a particular condition, then a coming soon, that there is something in this and in all of these things, because you haven't had PDUFA yet or official approval, you cannot talk about indications, you can't talk about side effects, you can't talk about any of those things. It's very strictly regulated with good reason. But you are still sort of greasing the skids, if you will, to get ready when it's coming. And then there's the now approved messaging. And then, of course, there's the ramp up time between now approved and now available because you have to start manufacturing and you need to have that period of time that comes along as well. We have probably 10 or 15% of our clients are actually on the other end of their patent protection, typically 10 years, right? Unless they've gotten a pediatric exemption for a few more years if they've done something for a rare pediatric condition. I hear that's going away, though. I don't know that for sure. But in a lot of cases, what they're trying to do, and we did work at the end of Lipitor's, for example, which has been generic for a long time. Everybody knew it was going to be generic, but what they really tried to do was get as many people on therapy as they possibly could before the generic started launching because of the inertia effect, where
Right.
they would just keep renewing the script rather than changing it and putting them onto a generic version of the same drug.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Finally, as we're wrapping up here, the we mentioned upstart and smaller pharmaceuticals that it's funny, we just got referred to another one yesterday. One of our happier clients referred us, and they're a
Good for
small
you.
pharma, and referred us to one of their sister companies. And that's challenge, and there's legacy. We were actually, it's funny you bring this question we had talked about before. Looking at the competitors, like, oh, that's a little daunting. So, what are some of the tactics you like when you've got a brand that's trying to challenge legacy brands like Novartis, and they don't have the same budgets, they don't have the same credibility. What are, without sharing everything, maybe a couple tactics you like.
Well, again, and yeah, this is such a common thing. I mean, we have, I think, 4 or 5 different clients right now that are in the oncology space, and partly one of the largest challenges that you often get, not only can you not get into ASCO, but in some cases, you can't even get into doctors' offices because they have blocked it out, right? This first right of refusal that, they will simply just buy all the inventory and go, yeah, we're just going to own it for the next year and a half. We know there's a competitor coming in that has better data, but we're not going to allow them to get into any of the platforms that you might traditionally use. A little bit less of that now, but because of the breadth of different channels that are there. But we love endemic programmatic for that, just because, again, it's served up in the endemic setting, but it's not necessarily the direct to pub pricing that you get. And, you lose some benefits, from that as well. But that's a great one that we like. We often actually pick smaller conferences, and we're recommending this for a couple of our brands that are launching. We've got 3 or 4 coming up this fall, where there might be, instead of, I don't know, 120,000 oncologists from all over the world, there may be 6 or 7 oncologists, but they're in a very, very particular specialty. Might be, gastrourinary, for example. So those conferences have a tendency to be much smaller, and you can make a much bigger splash at that conference. And again, you're trying to drop those seeds, right, where the doctors that are at that conference now know about your brand, they know about your treatment options or MOA, and then doctors, being the guys that they are, they always want to talk to other doctors about, on other platforms like Doximity, Sermo. It's a way to kind of get that information in there without actually paying for Doximity to do promotional types of advertisements on that platform.
So it's really interesting. You mentioned ASCO, and it's funny, we've done projects around Community Oncology Alliance, which is a different kind of show. And we've had um, but it's always a key part of the strategy, at least on our side, when we're working with somebody to have this is the conference, this is ours. And you mentioned also the uh, again, engagement. It's funny, just from our own experience. So sometimes the really big ones, it's just hard to get traction with people. If it's smaller, people seem to interact more. I don't know if that's been your experience with doing that as well, but it's like a lot more. You can walk away with more sort of leads or inquiries or engagement with a small show, in our experience at least, than you can in a big one, because you're just one in the crowd to see. Do you have any experience with that as well? Because it's like beyond the numbers. You would think, well, it's bigger, you're going to reach more people, but there's certainly a lot of engagement at the small ones. Any other comments before we wrap up on that?
Sure, no, absolutely true. And especially in the case, and I would say probably about 50% of our profile is rare disease, right? So it could be rare disease oncology. So you're not necessarily going to get diagnosed by 80 to 90% of the oncologists out there. And while it's splashy and sexy to be at ASCO, it may not, you're going for such a small subset of oncologists who are actually going to learn about this condition or know about it already and are looking for new treatment options. You absolutely should be at the smaller conferences. And for all the same reasons we talked about with journals to begin with, to kind of bring it around, it is really the credibility part of it, where you are there, you're presenting data in a lot of cases. If they have it to present, it's a great place to do it. Do the poster presentations, do the tabletop sponsor, one on public speaking engagements in particular rooms about particular things. It's such an important way to get that message out to the people that are most likely to actually start using your product.
Great. Well, Walt, again, I appreciate your time today. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over the recent years. And yeah, if you have questions, Walt, we'll put your profile up on our podcast. And obviously, you're president of CWG. So, Walt, I appreciate your time today. Any website or someplace people should go? Just your main website to find out
Yeah,
more?
the main website is cwgmarketing.com. And you'll see a lot of the different things that we do there. My LinkedIn profile has a tendency to be fairly active as well. Most people, especially after conferences, end up connecting with me there, which is great. So I love that. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. And even if It is not a business opportunity. I am very much a science geek, and so I will listen to the newest therapies that are coming out. I'm absolutely fascinated by it, so I love to just chat about what's out there and what's coming down the pike.
Great.
Uh,
All right. Let's work together on some projects in the future. And it's been great talking to you today.
Stuart, thanks so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Great.